Today we shall reflect on the theme, Service with Humility. And we see that the human tendency is always to seek glory, to go after recognition and titles. We hardly find maybe only a handful of people who are willing to work without any recognition, who will want to work behind the scenes, make sure everything is done, will be instrumental in running the entire program, but will not want their names to be announced. And here we see that the human tendency is also to portray ourselves as our best. We don't want others to see our shortcomings. But we see that God sees us who we truly are. God reads our minds, He knows what's in our hearts, and He sees us through and through. Similarly, the prophet Isaiah warned both the rulers and the people of Sodom and Gomorrah to humbly listen and submit themselves to the will of God. And this was necessary in order to do good and stop the evil ways. And in a way we see that Isaiah warns us to take seriously the need to cleanse our hearts and our minds. Here we see that we have been given this opportunity of 40 days preparation. During this Lenten season, it's a good time to reflect on our lives and look at the areas where we need to grow. Similarly, He also asks us to care for others who are around us. Sometimes we may be so occupied with our problems, with our worries, or sometimes we may be occupied with running after positions that often we tend to forget those who are around us, our family members, those who are working at a workplace, etc. And in a way, Prophet Isaiah tells us today that we need to pay attention to these small details which are there in our lives, but can make a big difference in our lives. Similarly, a glance at today's gospel reveals that Jesus warned the scribes and the Pharisees that to serve the people with humility. Now we see that the scribes and the Pharisees would like to make a big show of whatever they were doing. They wanted to show themselves as models of observing the law. But in doing so, they kept on imposing law after law and making things complicated for the people. At the same time, they were not willing to make things easier for them. And therefore Jesus, in a way, also warns the disciples and says that whatever you do it with humility and do it for the love of doing it, not just to show others. We see that the Pharisees would go through great lengths in order to promote themselves. They wanted recognition and honor for themselves. And therefore we see that true respect for God inclines us to be humble and to submit ourselves to the will of God. Jesus says that who exalts himself will be humbled, and who humbles himself will be exalted. And in a way, this is a call for each and every one of us, that during this Lenten season and even afterwards, when we go to do any service, let us keep in mind the teaching of the Lord to be humble and to do it for the love of God. Last year, during this time when COVID was just trying to become a bit serious, we see that there was a very good picture that was trending on the internet. It was of a man giving a bag to another man with goods and groceries, but in another hand there was the mobile in order to take a selfie. And therefore, in a way we see that this is something what we see is the trend of today's world. And in a way Jesus invites us today to stop this, because He says, whenever you do something, do it from your heart, do it with a humble nature. And therefore, today let us in a very special way pray for the grace that we may use this time to prepare ourselves, to cleanse our hearts, and more importantly, to be humble and dedicated in whatever we do.